Hello, today is Friday, April 25th, and welcome to episode 444 of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's podcast that gets you quickly up to speed 3 times a week on the national security and foreign policy debates I am shaking up America. I almost jumped ahead. I'm Jessica Jones, and I'm joined today on this fun Friday by NSI Deputy Executive Director Martha Miller, NSI Senior Fellow Morgan Vina, and NSI Visiting Fellow Algene Sarjuri. Okay, today we're talking about the latest developments in the Ukraine-Russia conflict. A headline that does not seem to go away, even though President Trump, thought we would end this in one day. There have been ongoing ceasefire talks in London. Secretary of State Marco Rubio skipped the London talks, but Keith Kellogg, the president's special envoy to Ukraine and Russia, did attend. Reportedly, Steve Witkoff, President Trump's kind of negotiator extraordinaire, might be going to Russia next week to talk to Putin. By all accounts, though, the Trump administration seems, ready to see a deal done and might be willing to kind of walk away if we don't see an end to the conflict soon. The Trump administration has been actively pushing for a peace deal that would see Ukraine cede Crimea to Russia, as well as kind of permanently shelve Ukrainian hopes of getting full membership to NATO. So, of course, Ukrainian President Zelensky, as well as our European allies, have pushed back on those positions, arguing that legitimizing Russia's territorial conquest would be, of course, a betrayal of Ukraine's sovereignty, harbinger of maybe more insecurity across the continent, and just bad things all around, authoritarians getting a green light to kind of run rampage. So with that, Morgan, I'll turn first to you. From reports, it seems like the Trump administration is being a little more sympathetic to the Russia's position, and that's in contrast to previous U.S. policy. Marco Rubio a few years ago even was like the U.S. should never recognize Crimea, a Russian Crimea. Is this a change? What does this mean for the future?
Yeah, thanks, Jess. Look, we need to be on the right side of history here, and right now we are going in the exact opposite trajectory. The more we acquiesce to Russia, the more Russia is going to take. Everything President Trump has done right now on Russia, particularly with the ceasefire deal, it really sends a message to Russia that they can get away with invading a sovereign country, a democratic country. And frankly, this sends a message that Russia can, walk through an open door to other democratic countries that it perceives as its in its interest to invade and take more territory. So again, sends the wrong message. I think ultimately, and I'm going to parrot Ambassador Haley here because she spoke out specifically on Ukraine recently and was critical of Trump's policy without specifically going in and attacking the president. That look, Ukraine has a right to defend itself here.
Turning now to you, Algene. Morgan spoke a little about Russ's position and obviously what they may get out of this conflict. Where do you see, how do they think about their, the cards they have right now? Do you think they think they're in a strong position? They're going to continue? What do you think?
I definitely think they think that they're in a strong position and they're going to continue. Look at the signals that they've been showing. We've been in 45 days of a ceasefire with quotes. And for 45 days, Russia has defied that ceasefire. Just 2 days ago or yesterday, Kyiv was hit by the deadliest strikes in almost a year, right? Including injuring and killing children. Okay, so this is a war it's a hot war, and even in the ceasefire, as we're calling for a ceasefire, the U.S. is contemplating withdrawing up to 10,000 troops from the region. The U.S. is saying, well, this agreement that's on the table basically rewards Russia for invading Crimea and would give and cede Ukrainian territory to Russia. So they have every incentive to continue to do what they have been doing since day one, since 2022 and before that. And so there is no incentive, regardless of the Truth Social posts by Trump yesterday calling on Vladimir to stop. He's not going to stop. Vladimir's signals to date have been keep going. and go stronger, and you can have this territory. And by the way, Ukraine, give up your NATO hopes. And so it's really quite emboldening to Putin, the way that the Trump administration has approached this ceasefire negotiation. And so it's really quite scary, and we can only expect to see more.
I mean, Martha, to Algene's point, there's a lot going on in the Trump administration. They're facing, Iran negotiations. We've got this conflict. We've got Gaza Riviera. It seems like the Trump administration might be seeing what's going on in Europe, isolated, right? It's just another issue for them to tackle. Is it an isolated issue? I mean, what happens in Europe? How does that impact what goes on around the world?
Yeah, look, it's, I think I think it's tempting to look at Ukraine as just an isolated regional conflict. And it feels like the Trump administration is treating it as such. But I think that misses the bigger picture and the real stakes because, behind Putin stands President Xi and Beijing, and they're quietly fueling the fight. They're testing whether the United States and allies will hold the line and whether we and our allies will stick together. So, even if Beijing is not flying bombers over Ukraine, China is deeply invested in this fight. They're supplying technology. They're buying Russian oil. They're backing, the Kremlin's battlefield machine with dual use technology, while calling themselves neutral on the conflict. And so, I think this is, I think to Morgan's point, this is about whether authoritarian powers can redraw borders by force and get away with it and redraw borders with democratic countries. So the way I see it, a Russian victory here isn't just a win for Putin, but would be a feather in the cap for China. And, specifically looking at Taiwan, it also would be precedent setting, this whole idea of recognizing Crimea as part of Russia totally plays into the hands of China's aims, totally would justify it. And I really don't see this being, a win for the United States. And I would dare to say that I don't think the American public would see it as a victory for the U.S. if the Russians have a victory here.
Well, thank you. That's a wrap, folks. So thanks so much to Kelly Crawley, Taylor Lang, Claude Jennings, and the entire NSA team for their help in producing today's episode. Join us on Monday, April 28th for another episode of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute podcast that gets you quickly up to speed on the national security and foreign policy debates that are shaking up America. We're on YouTube, so check us out there. Morgan's at a fancy hotel, so check out, you get to see her if you go YouTube. And if you like what you heard or saw, be sure to rate, review, and subscribe. Have a good weekend.